The first thing Samuel Hayes noticed was the smoke. It rose thin and gray above the bare Nebraska trees, like a warning the wind was trying to whisper to him. Nobody should have been out there. Not this late in autumn. Not near the abandoned Mackenzie place. Not with winter sitting just over the horizon like a hungry animal. Samuel stood by his north fence with his hammer still in his hand. 2 posts had rotted at the base, and the wire hung low enough that his cattle could slip through if they got curious. He had been fixing things alone for 3 years. 3 years since the fever took his wife Martha and their little boy Thomas. The house still carried their shadows. Martha's apron still hung on its hook. Thomas's wooden horse still sat on the mantel, like it was waiting for small hands to return. He wiped his brow and stared at the smoke again. It came from the woods to the west, where the creek ran dry and the cottonwoods clustered close. That land wasn't his, but it touched his. And in this country, what happened near you had a way of becoming your problem. Samuel swung up onto his bay mare, Buttercup, and rode toward the trees. Buttercup had opinions about everything, but she was steady. She carried him through his days, when he did not feel steady at all. The wind grew sharper as he neared the woods, bringing the smell of green wood burning. That meant someone was desperate, or someone did not know better. The Mackenzie cabin came into view through the branches. Its roof sagged, and the boards looked sun-bleached and tired. It should have been empty. Instead, smoke curled from the chimney. Someone had patched holes with canvas and scrapboards. Samuel stopped at the edge of the clearing and waited, keeping his hands calm on the reins. He did not want to startle anyone into doing something foolish. A child stepped out from behind the cabin, carrying an armful of kindling that looked too heavy for him. He froze when he saw Samuel. The sticks slipped from his arms and scattered across the ground. The boy's eyes were wide, not like a child seeing a stranger, but like a child bracing for harm. "It's all right," Samuel called, keeping his voice gentle. "I'm not here to cause trouble." The boy did not answer. He turned and ran inside the cabin, as if the door could swallow him. Samuel waited. The air was cold enough to sting his lungs. Buttercup shifted under him, but he kept her steady. After a moment, the cabin door opened again, and a woman stepped out. She stood in the doorway like she was guarding the place with her whole body. Her dress had once been blue, but now it was faded like winter sky. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, and her face showed the hard marks of too many days with too little rest. One hand gripped the doorframe. The other stayed near her skirt, hidden, like she held something sharp. "This is private property," she said. Her voice was calm, but fear lived underneath it, held down by force. "Yes, ma'am," Samuel replied. "I know. I'm Samuel Hayes. I own the land east of here. I saw your smoke and thought I should check." Her chin lifted. "We're not causing any harm." Samuel nodded slowly. "Winter's coming. That roof won't hold much snow." "We'll manage," she said, like she had practiced that sentence 100 times. Samuel looked past her and caught a glimpse of the boy peeking from behind her skirt. The child was thin, wearing patched clothes that were too light for the season. His feet looked wrapped in rags instead of boots. That kind of need had a sound to it, even in silence. It sounded like hunger, like cold, like a long road with nowhere safe at the end. "You know how to season wood?" Samuel asked, keeping his words simple. The woman's eyes narrowed. "We're making do." "Green wood smokes more than it burns," Samuel said. "There's a dead oak about a quarter-mile north. Lightning struck it last summer. It's dry, burns clean. If you have an axe, it'll help." She stared at him, like she was trying to figure out the trap. "Why would you tell me that?" Samuel shrugged. "Neighbors help neighbors." "We're not neighbors," she shot back. "We're nothing to you." The words hit closer than she meant. Samuel felt it anyway. He thought of Martha, who would have already been halfway across this clearing with a basket of food and a warm voice. Martha had been the bridge between people. Samuel had only ever been good with animals, weather, and work. He held her gaze. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but that boy is going to need warmer clothes by December, and that roof is going to give out." Her grip tightened on the door frame, pride and worry fighting in her face. "We don't need charity," she said. "I didn't offer charity. Samuel replied. Just information. What you do with it is your business. He started to turn Buttercup away. He did not want to push. He knew what it felt like when people tried to help and you were too raw to take it. Behind him, her voice came softer. The oak. You said 1/4 mile north. Lightning struck, Samuel said without turning. You can't miss it. He rode out of the clearing, but he felt their eyes on him until the trees swallowed the cabin from view. He told himself he should let it go. He told himself it was not his place, but his mind kept counting the days until the first hard freeze, and every thought ended at the same place. 3 days later, Samuel rode back. He said it was to check the fence line, but he had a sack tied behind his saddle. It held salt pork, dried beans, potatoes from his root cellar. Nothing fancy, just survival. This time he heard the sound before he saw them, the steady thud of an axe biting wood. He followed the sound to the dead oak. The woman was there, swinging the axe with more determination than skill. The boy gathered chips and small branches into a pile. The woman turned when she sensed Samuel, raising the axe without thinking, then lowering it when she recognized him. "Mr. Hayes," she said, still guarded. "Ma'am," Samuel replied, tipping his hat. He watched her hands. Blisters had formed, and the skin was split in places. Hard work could do that, but so could desperation. "That's tough work for hands not used to it," he said. "My hands have known work," she answered quickly. Samuel nodded, like he believed her, because he did. "Different kind of work," he said, and pointed at the axe. "May I?" She hesitated, then stepped back. Samuel took the axe and split a piece of oak clean. He showed her how to follow the grain, how to let the weight of the tool do the work. He did not talk too much. Teaching could feel like insulting if you weren't careful. He split a few more pieces, then handed the axe back. She tried again, better this time. For a while, they worked without words. Then, suddenly, the woman spoke as if she had decided something. "I'm Grace," she said, still swinging. "Grace Morrison. This is my son, Henry." Samuel looked at the boy. "Henry," he repeated. "That's a strong name." The boy ducked behind his mother, but Samuel saw curiosity in his eyes now, mixed with caution. Samuel untied his sack and set it on the ground. "I brought some supplies you might trade for," he said carefully. "I'm short on help with fence work. Thought maybe we could come to an arrangement. Fair work for fair wages. I pay in supplies." Grace stopped swinging. She stared at him like she was weighing every word. "Straight business," she said at last. "Nothing more." "Nothing more," Samuel agreed, even though he already felt it was more than that. Grace nodded once, like she had chosen the least painful option. "Then show me this lumber you mentioned," she said. "If it's real." Samuel felt his chest loosen just a little, like a knot had finally given way. "I'll bring the wagon tomorrow," he said. "We'll load what you need." Henry looked up at him then, his voice small but clear. "Mister," he asked, "will you come back?" Samuel met the boy's eyes and saw something that made him uneasy in the deepest way. "Hope." "Yes," Samuel said. "I'll come back." Samuel came back at first light with the wagon, just like he said he would. The bed was stacked with lumber he had pulled from the back of his barn, boards that were weathered but still strong. He told himself it was scrap. He told himself it was fair business. But he had picked the best pieces, the ones that would hold a roof through heavy snow, and he had wrapped a hammer, a saw, and a box of nails under a horse blanket so they would not be seen right away. Grace was already outside when he arrived. She had her hair tied back tight and wore work clothes that did not fit her well, like they were borrowed from a life she had not lived before. Henry stood close to her, watching Samuel with that same careful look, like he was trying to decide if this man was real. "Morning," Samuel said. Grace nodded. "Morning." They did not talk much at first. They worked. Samuel showed her how to check boards for rot, how to brace a weak wall, how to nail a patch so it did not pull loose in the wind. Grace learned fast. She did not complain. Her hands hurt, but she kept going. Henry carried nails in his pockets and brought them over one by one, like they were treasure. When Samuel asked him to hold a board steady, the boy took the job seriously, standing straight and still even when the cold made his nose red. By midday, the north wall of the cabin looked different. It still was not pretty, but the worst gaps were gone. The wind would not cut through so easy now. Grace stepped back and stared at their work like she could not believe it. "It'll help," Samuel said, trying to keep his voice plain. Grace wiped her brow with her sleeve. "It will," she admitted, but her eyes stayed guarded. Samuel noticed the way she kept glancing toward the trees, like she was listening for something. He knew that feeling. A person who had been hurt learned to hear danger before it arrived. He was bending to pick up a dropped nail when Grace went still. Her head tilted. Samuel heard it too. Hooves in the woods. More than one horse. Slow. Not hurried. Men who felt they had time. Grace's hand closed around her hammer. Henry's eyes widened, and he moved behind her without being told. 3 riders came into the clearing. Samuel knew 2 of them, Jack Thornton and his brother Pete. Men who carried themselves like the land belonged to them just because they were loud enough to claim it. The third was younger, with sharp eyes and a nervous mouth, like he was trying hard to look tough. Jack looked from the cabin to the wagon to Samuel. Then he smiled. "Well now," Jack said. "Sam Hayes, working like a handyman." Samuel kept his hands relaxed, but he shifted his stance a little, placing himself closer to Grace and Henry. "Afternoon, Jack." Pete's eyes moved over Grace in a slow way that made Samuel's jaw tighten. "Didn't know we had company in these woods." "This is Mrs. Morrison," Samuel said, firm and simple. "She's staying through winter. She has work with me." Jack leaned forward in his saddle. "Work, is it? Funny thing is, Sam, I happen to know the owners of the Mackenzie land. Folks back east. Chicago money. They don't make arrangements with widows they never met." Grace lifted her chin. "We're not hurting anyone." Pete gave a small laugh. "That's how trouble always starts. Someone says they're not hurting anyone, and then cattle go missing or barns burn." Samuel held Jack's gaze. "Say what you came to say." Jack's smile thinned. "We came because people talk. Smoke rising out here. A woman living in a broken cabin. A boy with no boots. A lonely man paying visits. It makes folks wonder." "What folks wonder is their own business," Samuel replied. "It becomes my business when it becomes the county's business," Jack said. "And right now, this looks like squatting." Grace stepped forward before Samuel could speak. "My husband made arrangements," she said, voice steady. "We have a lease." Samuel felt his eyes flick toward her. It was a lie, but it was a strong lie, spoken like a truth she had carried for months. Jack's brow rose. "A lease, huh? Let's see it." "It's at the bank," Grace said. "In Willow Creek. Mr. Garrett is holding it." The younger rider shifted in his saddle. Jack studied Grace's face, like he was searching for a crack. Pete snorted. "Garrett won't hold papers for some stray widow." Grace did not blink. "He will when it's legal." Jack sat back, thinking. A trip to the bank meant waiting. Questions. Time. Men like Jack did not like being made to wait. Samuel spoke. Calm but sharp. "I vouch for her." "That enough?" Jack looked at him like that was the real surprise. "You vouch for her?" "I do." For a moment, the clearing felt too quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. Jack's eyes turned cold. "Your word used to mean something, Sam." "It still does," Samuel said. Jack smiled again, but it was not friendly. "All right, we'll check the bank. But you hear me. If there's no lease, she's gone. Understand?" Grace's knuckles were white around the hammer, but she held her ground. "We'll see what the bank says." Jack turned his horse. "Come on, boys. Let's not waste daylight." But Pete did not move right away. He let his eyes slide over Grace one more time, then looked at Samuel. "A man gets lonely," Pete said softly, like he was offering advice. "Lonely men make foolish choices." Samuel did not answer. Pete finally wheeled his horse and followed the others. The hoofbeats faded into the trees, but the thread stayed behind like smoke. Grace let out a breath she had been holding. Her hands shook for a second. Then she forced them still. "They'll come back," she said. "Yes," Samuel replied. "They will." Henry stepped out from behind his mother. "Are they bad men?" he asked. Grace opened her mouth, then closed it. She did not want to frighten him. Samuel answered instead. "They're the kind of men who push until someone pushes back." Grace's eyes snapped to Samuel. "And what are you going to do, Mr. Hayes? Push back for us?" Samuel looked at the cabin, at the thin walls, at the boy's bare feet. Then he looked at Grace. "I'm going to do what's right." Grace's voice hardened. "Right gets people hurt." Samuel nodded once. "I know." They kept working, but it was different now. Every sound in the woods made Grace glance up. Every creak of a branch made Henry flinch. Samuel worked with his body, but his mind stayed alert, counting days, counting risks, counting what Jack Thornton might do when a bank visit did not go his way. Near sunset, Samuel loaded the tools back into the wagon. He tried to leave things behind in a way that would not feel like a gift. He stacked lumber close to the cabin and acted like it was just leftover. "I'll come back tomorrow," he said. Grace's eyes narrowed. "You don't have to." "I said I would," Samuel replied. Henry watched him climb onto the wagon seat. "Mr. Hayes," he called. "What was your boy's name?" The question hit like a cold slap. Samuel tightened his grip on the reins. Grace looked away, like she regretted the question even though Henry meant no harm. "Thomas," Samuel said, voice low but clear. Henry nodded solemnly. "That's a good name." Samuel drove home in silence. The sky was turning purple, and the first hard cold of evening was settling into the land. When he reached his house, he did not go inside right away. He stood in the yard and looked at the windows, the dark rooms, the empty chairs. For 3 years, the quiet had been his shelter. Now it felt like a cage. That night, he cleared the spare room. He dusted the dresser. He set a clean blanket on the bed. He told himself it was just in case. Just for safety. Just in case the cabin burned. Just in case Jack Thornton decided to prove a point. Just in case winter turned cruel. The next morning, snow flurried in the air like ash. Not a real storm. Just a warning. Samuel hitched his team to the wagon and drove back to the woods. Grace was outside again, but her face was different. Tighter, like she had not slept. "They were here," she said before he could speak. Samuel's stomach dropped. "Thornton." Grace nodded. "This morning. He said the bank has no papers." Samuel held his breath. "And what did he say after that?" Grace's eyes filled with anger, but she did not let it fall into tears. "He said we have until sundown." Samuel looked past her at the cabin, at the patched wall they had built together, at Henry standing in the doorway with his fingers curled around the frame, like he was trying to hold the whole place in place by force. Samuel swung down from a wagon. His voice came out steady, but it carried something new. "Then you're not staying here tonight." Grace stiffened. "We're not going to your house." Samuel took one step closer. "Grace, listen to me." Before he could say more, the sound of another horse cut through the cold air, coming fast through the trees. Not slow this time. Grace turned toward the woods, and Samuel's hand moved without thinking toward the rifle in the wagon. The rider burst into the clearing, and Samuel recognized the man's coat before he saw his face. It was Pete Thornton. Fear confirmed his grin. And he wasn't alone. Pete Thornton rode into the clearing like he owned it. 2 more men followed behind him, and even through the cold air, Samuel could smell whiskey and trouble. Pete's grin was the kind that did not belong on a decent man's face. "Evening's coming," Pete said, looking at Grace like she was the only thing that mattered. "And we came to make sure you understand what that means." Grace stepped back without meaning to. Henry pressed into her side, his small hand grabbing the fabric of her coat. Samuel moved forward, placing himself between them and the riders. His voice stayed calm, but there was iron under it. "You gave your message," Samuel said. "Now leave." Pete laughed. "You don't get to order us around, Hayes. This ain't your land." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "This is still my county, and those are still decent folk you're threatening." "Decent folk don't squat," one of the men muttered. Grace's jaw tightened. "We're leaving," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "There's no need for this." Pete tipped his hat. "No need at all, if you come peaceable. But you see, I don't trust people who lie about leases. Makes a man wonder what else you're lying about. His eyes slid to Samuel, or what you're trading for help. Samuel's chest burned, but he did not let his temper lead him. He had learned long ago that anger could make a man careless. He took one slow step forward. "This ends right now," Samuel said. Pete's horse shifted, and Pete leaned down in the saddle, his grin turning ugly. "Or what, Hayes? You're going to shoot 3 men over a stray widow and her boy." Samuel looked at Grace, then at Henry. The boy's face was pale, his eyes too old again. Samuel remembered Thomas's eyes on the last day, when the fever had stolen the light from them. He remembered how helpless he had been, how the world had kept turning while his life fell apart. He was not going to feel that helpless again. "Grace," Samuel said quietly, without taking his eyes off the men, "get Henry in the wagon." Grace hesitated. Pride tried to stand up inside her, but fear for her child was stronger. She grabbed Henry's hand and moved fast. Samuel stayed planted between her and the riders. Pete watched her climb into the wagon, and his smile faded. "So that's it. You're taking her home." Samuel did not answer. He reached up and loosened a rope that held the lumber in place, as if he was simply making room for passengers. It was a small move, but it signaled something clear. Pete's horse stepped forward. "You can't just steal her away." Samuel's head tilted slightly. "Steal? Like she's property?" Pete's eyes flashed. "Men like you think you can play hero, but heroes bleed same as everyone else." The 2 men with him began to spread out, flanking like wolves testing a fence. Samuel kept his body steady, but his mind tracked every movement. He had the rifle in the wagon. He had a pistol in his belt. He also had something more important than weapons. He had witnesses. Across the clearing, a horse whinnied. Another voice carried through the trees. "That's far enough." A rider came into view. Then another. Then another. It was the Simpson brothers from the next farm over. 3 big men with quiet faces and heavy hands. Behind them came old Mr. Wilkes from Creek Bend and young Tom Peterson from town. They were not lawmen, but they were neighbors, and they had heard the raised voices and come to see what was happening. Pete's grin wavered. He turned his head slightly, gauging numbers. Samuel did not smile. He simply said, "You want to threaten a woman and child in front of half the county?" Pete spat into the dirt. "This ain't your business, Simpson." "It is when you're trying to burn cabins and run off widows," one of the Simpsons said, voice flat. Grace sat in the wagon with Henry, her hands wrapped around him like a shield. Her eyes flicked to Samuel, filled with something sharp and fierce. She did not want to be saved. She wanted to stand on her own feet, but Samuel could see the truth in her face. She was tired of running. Pete's horse danced under him. He was trapped between pride and caution. Men like him hated being watched, because watching meant consequences. "You think you're all so righteous," Pete snapped. "That woman's lying about who she is." Grace's voice cut through the cold. "I'm a mother," she said. "That's who I am." Her words were simple, but they landed hard. Even the wind seemed to pause again. Samuel climbed onto the wagon seat and picked up the reins. He kept his eyes on Pete. "She's coming with me," Samuel said, "and you're not stopping it." Pete's face turned red with anger. "This isn't finished." Samuel's voice stayed low. "It will be if you're smart." Pete looked at the group of neighbors again. He knew he could not win a fight with witnesses, not without turning himself into something the sheriff would have to hang. He forced a laugh that sounded wrong. "Fine," he said. "Take her. But when this blows back on you, Hayes, don't come crying to the rest of us." He wheeled his horse around so suddenly that snow kicked up at a spray. The 2 men with him followed, glancing back once, like they wanted to remember Grace's face. When the hoofbeats faded, the clearing felt like it could finally breathe again. Samuel let out a slow breath. He looked at Grace, and for the first time, he did not speak like a man offering information or business. He spoke like a man making a promise. "You don't have to do that anymore," he said. Grace blinked. "Do what?" "Stand out here alone," Samuel replied. "Split wood with bleeding hands. Patch walls that won't hold. Run every time a cruel man decides he's bored. You don't have to live like that anymore." Her mouth tightened, and Samuel saw the pride rise again, fierce as a flame. "I'm not charity," she said. "I know," Samuel answered. "That's why I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a place. Work. Safety. A roof that holds. A stove that stays warm. A chance for Henry to sleep without fear." Grace's eyes shone, but she held her tears back with stubborn force. "And what do you want, Mr. Hayes?" Samuel swallowed. This was the moment where the truth mattered more than the words. "I want you alive," he said simply. "Both of you. That's what I want." Silence fell between them, heavy and honest. One of the Sensen brothers cleared his throat. "Hayes, you want us to ride along to your place? Make sure nobody follows." Samuel nodded once. "I'd appreciate it." The neighbors did not stay long. They did not make a show of it. They simply rode with Samuel's wagon until the trees thinned and the open plains returned. When Samuel's house came into view, they tipped their hats and turned back. Just like that, a line had been drawn, not by law, but by community. Samuel pulled the wagon into his yard. The house stood quiet, smoke rising from the chimney. It looked the same as it always had, but now it felt like a place that might hold voices again. Grace helped Henry down from a wagon. The boy stared at the house like it was a miracle he did not trust yet. "Is this where you live?" Henry asked. "Yes," Samuel said. Henry looked at him with a serious face. "Is it warm?" Samuel nodded. "Warm." Grace stood still at the foot of the porch steps. Her eyes moved over the windows, the door, the solid walls. A life that did not leak cold air. A life that did not require running. She turned her head slightly, and her voice came out small for the first time since Samuel had met her. "If we step inside," she said, "people will talk." Samuel's answer came quick. "They're already talking. Let them." Grace stared at him. Then she looked down at Henry, whose hand was reaching for hers. She took it. They climbed the steps together. Inside, the warmth hit them like a blanket. The stove crackled. The room smelled of coffee and clean wood smoke. Grace's eyes went to the table, where Samuel had already set out a loaf of bread and a pot of beans, as if he had known this would happen. Henry moved closer to the stove, holding his hands out to the heat. His shoulders dropped just a little. He looked smaller now, more like a child than a survivor. Grace's gaze landed on the spare room doorway. She saw the made bed, the folded blankets, the pitcher of water, the clean towel hung on a peg. Preparations Samuel had tried to pretend were casual, but could not hide. "You planned this," Grace said quietly. Samuel did not deny it. "I hoped for it." Grace's throat moved, like she was swallowing something heavy. "We'll work," she said. "We'll earn our keep." Samuel nodded. "You will. Fair work. Fair wages. But tonight you rest." Grace's eyes flicked toward the mantel, and she saw it. A small wooden horse, worn smooth by little hands long gone. She froze. Samuel followed her gaze. His voice softened. "That was my boy's." Grace's face changed. Something in her shifted, like she finally understood the kind of loneliness that lived inside this house. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Samuel shook his head once. "Don't be. Just understand me." Grace looked at Henry, then back at Samuel. Her pride still stood tall, but it had stopped fighting the truth. "Thank you," she said. Samuel's jaw tightened, not with anger now, but with emotion he did not have a name for. He nodded once, like that was all he could manage. That night, Henry ate 2 bowls of beans and fell asleep by the stove before Grace could even get him into bed. Grace carried him to the spare room and tucked him in with a blanket that smelled like clean soap. When she came back into the main room, Samuel was sitting at the table, hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold. Grace stood there for a moment, as if she did not know what to do with a safe room and quiet. Samuel spoke first, keeping his voice simple. "Steady. You can stay as long as you need," he said. "Till spring. Until you're ready. Whatever it is." Grace's eyes filled, and this time she did not fight it. One tear slipped down her cheek, then another. "I don't know how to stop being afraid," she said. Samuel stared into his cup, then looked up at her. "Neither do I." But you don't have to learn alone. Grace nodded slowly, like she was accepting something deeper than shelter. Outside, the wind moved across the plains. Inside, the house held warmth, breath, and quiet human life again. And Samuel Hayes, a man who had lived 3 years like a ghost, felt something begin that he had not dared to hope for. The beginning. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe to From Wild West 2, where every tale rides through loss, courage, and the kind of love that grows when two broken hearts dare to stand together. See you in the next story, partner.